Hey, so this is Jorge from Hypothyroidism Success Story, and this video I'm going to talk about sugar, talk a little bit about adrenal fatigue and how it all relates to hypothyroidism. And so I've gotten a few comments over the last few years, and there seems to be this idea, or people ask me, what's your stance with sugar? Because a lot of people think that I have this thing against sugar. And so I want to clarify that. And also, through these videos, I also want to make sure that, you get to know like the real me, like what do I really do every day? Because I'm not exactly against sugar. Like I do eat sugar, but there's a few things that you have to understand though, is where I'm at today. Like all the things that I have done over the last few years has put me in a position that's very, very different than when I first started. And so let me start out with this. I'm going to start out with going back to the very beginning and the main reason why I personally started cutting back on sugar, and what have been like some of my experiences with it and all that kind of stuff. And so the first thing, first and foremost, the first reason why I started to cut sugar out of my diet was because I understood one thing, and something that actually relates to a hypothyroidism, was that, like I mentioned in some of my other videos, a good portion of the people that have hypothyroidism also have digestive issues, which also in turn cause a lot of autoimmune problems. And so, just to make sure that everyone's up to date with what I mean by that is that everything that you eat is eventually going to go down to your gut, and it's going to be digested by different bacteria. Your microbiome, your gut flora, there's different names for these things, but it's basically all kinds of bacteria. And so one thing that I understood about sugar was that sugar feeds a lot of the bad bacteria that causes all these digestive issues that we have. And for me, it was something that it was very easy for me to see. It was kind of like an epiphany, because some of I was a home brewer, and I teach how to brew beer over at brewbeeranddrankit.com. And one of the things that I teach, about sugar is, sugar is basically, if you take just a molecule of sugar, like sucrose, for example, if you think of that as one link, and you start joining these sugars together, you start creating a chain of sugars. That's basically what a carbohydrate is. Like the more links you have together, the more sugars you have kind of joined together. That's what makes up a carbohydrate. And so in brewing beer, what I teach is basically the reverse, where we take barley or wheat, which has starch, and then we convert that starch into sugar by using digestive enzymes that break down that chain into individual links until we have, the simple sugars like sucrose, maltose, and all these other ones that we use to ferment to make beer. And so because I understood that, I also understood that the things that tend to cause a lot of the digestive issues that we come across are things like yeast, mold, fungus, parasites, and these things are basically they all feed off of sugar. And so using all that knowledge, basically that's why I personally started to fast, and that's why I have found fasting to be one of the most effective things that anyone can do if you have digestive issues. And so that's why my morning routine now, it's more of a ketogenic based diet where I eat like this smoothie. I've talked about it in a few different videos, where it's coconut oil, hemp seeds, the greens from Organifi. I have shaved coconuts in here, different minerals and things like that. But the thing is, no sugar. The other reason for it is because, as I'm, one of my conditions or symptoms or things that was happening to me is I had low vitamin D, which was causing me to have low hormones. And so low hormones and low vitamin D, the thing to understand about that is that vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, and it needs fats so that it can dissolve into those fats. And sugar just messes up all that process. And so that's the main reason why I personally cut back from sugar. So the first and foremost is because of it's just so much easier to fix and restructure your gut flora when you cut sugar out. Also, the second thing is, with sugar, it's very different to operate. For your body to function based off of sugar as a source of fuel compared to fat as a source of fuel. And so, this is actually a very common mistake that I see when people try to copy, or they think that the smoothie itself is what's making me lose weight, lean down, and or eliminate fatigue. But it's not. It's not necessarily the smoothie itself. It's that I understand that my body, and your body does this as well. When your body goes about 12, 14 hours without any kind of sugar or carbohydrates, then it's kind of like it flips a switch inside and says, hey, let's start burning fat. And so what I do, the reason why I do intermittent fasting is for that reason. So like if I have my last meal at 6 p.m., by 6 a.m., 8 a.m., my body enters a fasted state, or it can also be called a state of ketosis, when my body starts burning fat as a source of fuel. And so I make sure to feed it good fats so that it has energy to function and operate. The moment you eat any kind of carbohydrate at that point, whether it be anything from simple carbs like pasta, bread, or whatever, or even some of the more complex carbs like sweet yams or sweet potatoes, basically healthier versions of carbohydrates, because every carbohydrate turns into sugar eventually. Your body comes out of that ketosis state and it no longer is burning fat as a source of fuel. It now starts burning sugar as a source of fuel, which is not necessarily a bad thing if you understand how the body works when it's burning sugar as a source of fuel, because this is something that I see a lot of people don't understand. And it's something that I learned the hard way, because, and if I go back to my journey, my journey started when I did my 90 days of juice fasting, which did wonders as far as restructuring my gut flora, detoxifying my body. Obviously lost a lot of weight doing that. But the biggest thing was that transitioning out of that, what I did was since I was basically clean, like super clean, and I was not really craving any kind of junk food or sugars or anything like that. I went from basically juice fasting, and the way I transitioned into eating food again was basically by being, I was basically raw vegan at that point, and then started introducing, other foods. But the biggest mistake that I did back then was that, as a raw vegan or eating, mostly, when I went from raw vegan into cooked foods, I would say that's when I started making mistakes, because like one of the first things that I started adding to my diet was hummus. And so with hummus, because it's basically carbohydrates, and I at the time I didn't understand this part that I'm about to share, I basically kind of got back into poor digestive issues, or poor digestion, or I should say I started getting digestive issues again. Because one of the things that you have to understand about sugar is that they feed all the bad bacteria that you're trying to get rid of. And not all bacteria is bad. Obviously, probiotics are good. Not all yeast is bad. Some yeast are good. We have brewer's yeast that are basically responsible for making different kinds of vitamins, like vitamins B. That's why you hear about like true German style Hefeweizens, the beer, being high in B vitamin. B vitamin content is because of the brewery yeast strain that it uses. But there is also a bad kind of yeast, like yeast candida, that when you have overgrowth of that kind of yeast, that can cause digestive issues. And the thing is that both of them feed off of sugar, because they're all fungus essentially. And so that's why, since you can't choose, like even if you eat good carbohydrates, you can't choose and tell, your gut flora, like, hey, yeast candida, this food is not for you. This is only for the good yeast, right? You can't do that. And so that's why you have to cut out sugar if you have digestive issues, which again, if you have thyroid issues, there's a great chance that you have autoimmune problems and digestive issues. At least that's what I'm finding from the people that I've talked to and been sharing this information with over the years. So the other thing is, when you're using sugar or you're eating carbohydrates, if that's part of your diet, what a lot of people don't understand is that the body can only store so much sugar, in the form of glycogen. And most of the meals that people eat, especially, if you don't understand how sugar works in the body, what a lot of people do is they tend to overeat carbohydrates, and so their macros, basically their ratio of fats, protein to carbs, is usually not good. I find a lot of people are eating either like a low fat, maybe high moderate protein, and then moderate or high carbs. And so the biggest problem when you're following a diet like that is that it's very, very easy to overdo carbohydrates, so that they eventually become sugar. And the thing is that when your body gets oversaturated with sugars, it basically creates this negative feedback loop. So basically, every time you eat sugar, your insulin levels rise, and then it gets to a point where it becomes saturated and it stops responding to any more sugar. When that happens, it's kind of like if you've ever talked and with a mic in front of a speaker, and you hear that whining pitch, like high pitch negative feedback loop. That's basically kind of what happens in the body, where you get to a point where you eat so much sugar that your insulin levels just spike, and then your body stops responding to it. Well, what happens at that point is that your body basically thinks that the cells are not getting sugar delivered to them, and so they start trying to find other sources of sugar, which basically creates like this domino effect where it starts sourcing sugar, especially from like your muscles. It starts breaking down your muscle, because the body can actually make sugar out of your muscles, out of amino acids. It's a process called gluconeogenesis. And so your body starts breaking down muscle, and in order to do that, it basically kicks on your adrenal, so it starts releasing cortisol, and that's basically the process that it goes through to start breaking down muscle so that it can feed sugar to the cells, not because the cells need it, but because it's not getting that signal from insulin. The insulin response, and so that's what causes the adrenal fatigue. At least that's one way that I've read and researched about. And so, that's another reason why, for me, I've just done so much better, following more of a ketogenic type diet throughout the morning, and then at night, like for dinner, I do tend to eat. I do tend to eat healthy, but if I'm out and about, if I go out to dinner and maybe we're meeting friends, or like for example, I'm going out of town tomorrow. We're going to be going snowboarding up in Whistler in Canada, and so like when I travel, it's not easy for me to do these smoothies. Like it's like I can't just bring my Vitamix with me and stuff like that. So when I travel, like I don't always follow like the best practices. Like if you were to meet me out when I'm traveling, you see me eating, you're probably like, oh wow, like how are you so healthy if you eat that way, kind of thing, because I don't always eat the healthiest. And that's like another reason why I want to make these videos, because I don't want you to get the idea that I'm like super healthy and super strict all the time. I do live a normal life. I do eat sugar. I do eat sweets every now and then. But because I've cut back so much, and because I've detoxed so much, and because I know how much better my body feels when I go ketogenic versus eating carbohydrates, especially earlier in the day, that's why for me this just has become like my habit, my default, which is I guess it's a concept that I'm hoping that kind of comes through with this video, is that a lot of times you tend to have different habits or a default food, to where like if you were to take a look at what you ate last week and compare it with the week before, you might start to see a pattern that there are certain foods that you are eating on a regular basis. And if you were to switch those up and make some of those foods, or especially like your earlier meals, be more ketogenic type smoothies, that's when you're going to start seeing a difference. And so like I've been doing this for, I don't know, I started in 2012, so it's just over 5 years. Actually a little bit less than that, but close to 5 years of detoxing my body, cutting back on sugar, lately, alcohol, which, beer, I haven't really been drinking too much beer ever since. But even as of lately, I've cut back even more to where I'm not drinking beer more than maybe twice, three times per month, I would say. So it's not even like every week now that I drink beer, and so and I just keep cutting back for the same reasons. And again, granted, I've already done a 90-day fast. I've already done multiple days of block fasting. I've been doing intermittent fasting pretty much ever since 2014, so about almost 3 years. And so over time, I talk about this in a previous in another video earlier, where it just got to a point where like my habits and like the things that I was doing every day, it was taking me this direction. And then once I start to understand, it's like, hey, I need to detox, I need to clean my body, I need to restructure my gut flora, I need to take on more probiotics, cut out on sugar, eat more fats, and eat more sources of food that have fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K. All these things, combined have kind of taken me in a different direction. And so don't get the idea that I don't eat sugar or that I don't eat carbs or that I'm against it. But understand that I've just found it way more effective. I feel more energy. I've been actually leaning down a lot. I've actually been getting rid of so much fat lately, mostly because I've been following these practices. And so that's all I'm sharing with you guys. It's what I'm doing. It's why I do, and I try to share like my logic and all the things behind it. So again, and for some people that that watch my video and think that I'm trying to come across as like a health guru or something like that. I'm not really. I've just had to research this for myself because of what I went through back then. Like my health was just not good, and this is what has helped me. And from my understanding, it shouldn't be something that's just for me. It should be something that applies to most people, with a few exceptions, because there's always a reason why someone may be a little bit different or whatnot. But I find that's rarely the case. Most people that have actually gone out and tried the things that I share, they've reported a lot of basically I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from it. So anyway, so that being said, that's kind of my stance on sugar and carbohydrates. So hopefully this helps you understand a little bit better as far as why I'm very adamant about cutting out sugar. Especially if you have digestive issues, any kind of adrenal fatigue. And it's why I'm always going to go back to, like, if you have yet to try a 5-day juice fast, you definitely should look into it. If you're subscribed to my newsletter, or if you go to my website, I'm actually making, I had a lady, Lisa, she did a 15-day detox, and so she actually documented every day, day by day, how everything went. She basically did nothing but juices, and I think she had a few other drinks, like teas and stuff like that. Things that I basically share that I did as well. And you can see her transformation. It's also it's very impressive, and it just goes to tell you that that I'm not the only one that's getting results by following this type of understanding this type of information more than anything. And so for whatever that's worth, I hope this is helpful, and I will see you. I don't know if I'll be making videos this week since I'm going to be out of town, but if I don't, then I'll try to make one as soon as I get back. And so that being said, I'll see you next video.